Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Welcome back to a special edition, a special Monday edition of the Jet Take. My name is Ben Blessington alongside Kyle Fahey. Kyle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Ben.
All right. Yeah, we're sitting here. We missed last week's episode, so we're going to do a little thing. Today we have a special guest on the line. We're going to get to him in just a second. But really quickly, you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter. That's probably the best place to reach us. We love interacting with our fans. We are currently, let's pull this up. We're sitting at 810 followers. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. So let's see if we can get the remaining 190. And then you can listen to the show on I got to make sure my math is right there. You can find the show on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, iHeartRadio. We're pretty much all over the place. And again, you can follow us on Twitter at the Jet Take and also on Instagram at the Jet Take. So without further ado, we're going to get to our special guest on the line. This is Joe Caporoso, who does a lot of things, but probably the reason he's on the show is he is the founder of Turn on the Jets, which is a terrific Jets website, and we're going to talk to him all about that, some of the other stuff he does, and this current Jets team. So, Joe, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on, taking time out of your Monday night. Before we're going to hop around here, but before we get into the current team, and we have some questions from past teams and stuff, why don't you tell the listeners who probably don't know, but most of them probably do know who you are because you're pretty big within the Jets community. Why don't you tell them what you do for Turn on the Jets, how you started it, just kind of what that is all about.
Sure. So I am the founder of TurnOnTheJets.com. I've been running the site for about 7 or 8 years now. I was blogging around a few different sites when I was in college, and then NBC Sports started a network of blogs for NFL teams, MLB teams, and NHL teams. Asked me if I wanted to run their site called Turn on the Jets. I did that for about a year. Their network shut down, but they allowed me the ability to buy the domain from them and continue running the site independently. So I've been doing that since I've been about 23. I'm 30 now. I've been running the site. Obviously, we have a nice collection of writers who do a really great job, turning out consistent content for us, driving our traffic on social media and engaging with fans, through blogging with the Jets or blogging about the Jets. It definitely opened up a few opportunities for me to have a career in sports. And over the past 4 years, I've been working for Whistle Sports in New York City, where I'm our VP of social media. So that is my day job. I continue to do the Jets blogging on the side and running the website, and that kind of sums it up. So yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and it does feel crazy to think that I've been blogging about the Jets for almost 10 years now. But time moves quick. Not as quick the past 6 years with the lack of success that they've had. But when I did first start, it was an exciting time as they did go to back-to-back AFC Championship games, so it feels like 100 years ago.
Well, that's awesome. I've been reading Turn on the Jets articles for I pretty much ever since I've become a Jets fan. So I definitely it's awesome that we have the chance to bring you on the show. And yes, those back-to-back AFC Championships do feel like a lifetime ago. Well, let's talk about this current team for a bit. I guess we'll just start off just kind of an open-ended question. What are you expecting from this club? Because, I mean, the inner circles around the NFL, I guess, you go from ESPN to NFL.com. A lot of people expect this team to be maybe the worst team in the NFL. What are you expecting? I mean, there are some that think this is a young team that has, some potential with some question marks depending on how things play out. Because, again, you don't really know what Hackenberg is. But what is your ceiling for this team, your floor, and your expectation as a whole for this upcoming season?
Look, I think you can make a fair case, and even if Jet fans don't want to hear this, I think you can make a fair case that on paper, at least, this is arguably the worst roster in the NFL. Now, that being said, the team did go 5-11 last year, and you can also, on the other hand, make an argument that they're not going to be any worse than they were last year because despite losing big names, they didn't really lose anybody who did all that much last year. They lost Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was awful. They lost Darrelle Revis, who was awful. They lost Nick Mangold, who hasn't been picked up by another team yet and really missed a lot of time last year anyway. Same goes for Eric Decker. They'll definitely miss David Harris in the middle, but it's not like Harris was a Pro Bowl caliber player anymore. And I do think there is probably a little more young talent on this roster than maybe some people give them credit for it. I think it's easy if you don't follow the team closely to not think guys like Quincy Enunwa, Robbie Anderson, or Bilal Powell can make any plays while they were relatively productive, especially considering the circumstances they were in last year. So, yeah, I do think on paper it's fair to say that, look, either the Jets, Browns, or maybe the 49ers or Jaguars are the worst team in the league. You could also look at it and say, look, they found a way to win 5 games last year, and I'm not sure why they're tangibly worse than last year. So can they find a way to match or slightly exceed that win total? I would say the best-case scenario, and depends how you define what best-case scenario is them maybe winning 7 games, hovering around 500 for longer than anybody expects, and then probably finishing somewhere around 7-9. Worst case, and again, it depends how you define worst case, would be a 1-15, 2-14 type season. I tend to think that they're probably going to split the difference and probably be 5-11 or 6-10. Obviously, you hope that is a competitive 5-11 or 6-10 where you have young players ascending and taking strides and looking like you have the core of the team. I've seen this team multiple times be projected to be the worst team in the NFL, or maybe be the worst team on the NFL on paper and still find a way to win more games than they should. I think people forget just how bad that 2013 roster was, and they still found a way to go 8-8. How bad that 2012 roster was, and they still went 6-10. And I don't think this is going to happen, but if you remember back, and this is way back to Eric Mangini's first year, everybody thought that team was going to be the worst team in the NFL, and they actually went 10-6 and made the playoffs. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this year, but it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if, in terms of a win total, that they found a way to maybe steal a game from Buffalo or beat Cleveland and Jacksonville, or maybe beat San Diego, and ended up with 5 or 6 wins.
Right, you brought up the roster and how it's been built, and you said the word core. Let's talk about the guy who's responsible for this roster, who's responsible for building the core of this team, Mike Maccagnan. What are your thoughts on the job that he has done with the team? Do you think that he's made some clear mistakes? Do you think that he's done a fairly good job with what he's been handed, regarding Woody Johnson, with, the win now attitude that he, has had for the past, basically his whole life, to say. So what are your thoughts on Maccagnan's job so far?
I'm probably a little more critical of Maccagnan than many Jet fans are. I think for most Jet fans, the scapegoats are usually, Todd Bowles and Woody Johnson. And I'm not saying that Woody Johnson doesn't have a voice in the room, and it's not an easy owner to be a GM for. But I think, you have to evaluate Maccagnan by, what he's done. And he inherited a roster that had a full collection of draft picks and had a ton of cap space, and signed 4 guys to rebuild the secondary, and 3 of those 4 guys are gone after 2 years. And really only, Cromartie gave them half of a good season. Revis ultimately really only gave them half of a good season. Gilchrist gave them 1 season. So really, gave all those guys sort of these 2-year contracts and didn't get much or anything sustainable out of rebuilding that position. You look at all of the free agent contracts he's handed out, there's really only been one successful one, and that's James Carpenter, which has absolutely been a great signing for them. He's been their most consistent lineman over the past 2 years. But beyond that, Jarvis Jenkins, bringing Kellen Davis back 2 years, even Steve McClendon, who missed a lot of time last year, the Forte signing, which many have speculated that the Jets sort of scrambled on out of a fear that he'd go to New England. Nothing has really panned out there. And then in the draft, again, it's early to evaluate these draft picks. You don't want to prematurely call some of these guys busts. And, you look at that first year, Devin Smith, again, he's about as close as someone you could call a bust at this point, considering all the time he's missing. He's going to miss this year. Obviously, there's a lot of skepticism out there on Hackenberg as his other second-round pick. Darren Lee was fairly disappointing as a rookie last year. And then some of the mid-round picks, guys like Bryce Petty and Jarvis Harrison, have been disappointing, are no longer with the team, or probably don't look like long-term contributors. Now, why this year is important, if guys like Brandon Shell, Justin Burris, Jordan Jenkins, and Lorenzo Malden can prove to be competent starters, and then all of a sudden Maccagnan's drafts start looking a lot better. So I think those 4 guys and Darren Lee are really going to go a long way to defining just how well Maccagnan's done through 3 years, obviously along with Christian Hackenberg as well. If Hackenberg is the player that many expect him to be, it's going to be hard to have faith in Maccagnan to make the right decision at quarterback in the NFL draft next year, because outside of Leonard Williams, who really fell into his lap, and Leonard Williams is a great player, but you can make the argument that the value of that pick has somewhat been undermined by not finding a way to move Muhammad Wilkerson or Sheldon Richardson, sort of having a glut of defensive ends. So it's hard to say that his overall resume has been that positive. I mean, he's 15-17 through 2 years. I don't think anybody's expecting the team to be over 500 this year. So it's a fair question to say, what has Maccagnan done, or what decisions has he made through 2+ years to make you fully confident that he's the guy who's going to be capable of rebuilding this roster from scratch? Because if you look at it right now, the team's 2 best skill position players on offense, Quincy Newell and Bilal Powell, weren't acquired by Maccagnan. They were acquired by John Idzik and Mike Tannenbaum. The team's second best offensive lineman, still at this point, Brian Winters, was acquired by John Idzik. So you would think that you would want all of the top players on the team by this point to probably be acquired by Maccagnan. And I don't know if we're at that spot yet, but we'll learn a lot more after how we see some of these mid-round draft picks play this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're completely correct when you say, you have to wait a little bit before you can judge these players. For all we know, Devin Smith could be a Pro Bowler when those ACLs heal up. We don't know about that. Highly doubt it, but it's a possibility. All right, we talked about the front office. Now let's talk about the guys on the sideline. And we'll start with Todd Bowles, obviously, I guess the chief. He's the CEO of our team. He's the face, really. What are your thoughts on the job he has done? Because he's, like you said, he's kind of been a scapegoat for Mike Maccagnan. You obviously came out, said you weren't that impressed with Maccagnan. Bowles, what are your thoughts on him?
Look, I think Bowles did a bad job last year. I think it's fair to be critical of Bowles, because you could say, what has been the really banner win that he's had through 2 years? So you could point to that New England game. The reality is New England was down a lot of people in that game and maybe didn't need it quite as badly as the Jets did. It was still a nice win at the time, but failing to win that Week 17 game in Buffalo with some of the questionable coaching decisions that happened in that one, not using Chris Ivory, the way they sort of approached that game in a conservative manner was definitely frustrating. And, last year this was a team that looked at times to have quit and was just sort of going through the motions and was getting run off the field week after week after week. And I don't think Bowles is particularly strong with the media, and I don't think that really matters. But if you're losing, it will get amplified. And the optics on him not really being great with the media hurt him when the team is losing. And not just losing, but losing by 20, 30, 40 points, and just appears to be disorganized and not really putting forth a lot of effort. Now, he'll have a lot of young players this year who should be hungry. So, again, this is going to be a good opportunity to evaluate him, but he needs to make major strides in his ability to manage the game during the game and make sure that his team is finding a way to fight and be competitive week after week and just cut down on the miscommunication. So, I thought year one was relatively encouraging for him. They didn't pull off any major upsets, but they handled business for the most part. They beat the bad teams on their schedule down the stretch. They fought back and won that game against the Giants. To go 10-6 as a rookie head coach under any circumstance is impressive. But then it was disappointing to see him take, some major steps back last year. And I think the conventional wisdom is that this team is going to be bad this year and that he's going to be the guy to be on the chopping block for it. And the only way that he's going to be able to push back against that is to manage the game better and to find a way to have some of these young players overachieve or take major strides.
Yeah, for sure. And you remember in Todd Bowles' rookie year, I mean, this is kind of a depressing fact, but if the Jets were 2, wins against the Bills away from being the number 1 seed in the AFC. And yes, you can chalk that up to being having an easy schedule, a lot of veterans pretty much putting their last good year or productive year under Todd Bowles. And it's hard to chalk up how much of it was Todd Bowles' leadership or whatever. But I think you saw in 2016 with a much less talented roster that he definitely showed some more cracks in his game. And in his rookie year, I mean, we saw those mistakes with game management and the some of. I guess that was pretty much his most glaring issue, but in 2016 you saw a lot of the locker room issues and people started speaking out more, and it's when you lose a lot of those things come out more. But I think he showed some promise in his rookie year, but I'm curious, you kind of touched on it there towards the end. Do you think Bowles and Maccagnan will be back in 2018? Do you think it'll be one or the other, or do you think they'll both be gone or both be back? Just your take on that.
I mean, I think it's definitely an open-ended question at this point. I think if you were putting betting odds, the highest odds would probably be on Maccagnan being back with Bowles not being back. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the right choice, but if you put a gun to my head right now and said what was the most likely thing to happen, I would say that is it. Now, apparently, Woody Johnson is, given his assurances that he understands this is a rebuilding year. Hard to buy that because he gave similar assurances to Eric Mangini about the Brett Favre trade, and he was still fired. So it's easy to say now that you accept the rebuild. It's less easy if the Jets start 0-2 and have 8,000 people at their home opener in Week 3 and are getting blown out week after week after week. It's going to depend I think, again, if this is roughly a 6-10 team, it's what type of 6-10 is that? Is Brandon Shell and Wesley Johnson and Justin Burris and Jordan Jenkins and Quincy Enunwa taking strides and looking like they're going to be the core of a team that you can build around? Are the Jets going into New England or going into Miami and only losing by 7 or 10 points and hanging around to the fourth quarter? Are they stealing an upset win at some point halfway through the year? Are they fighting week after week and not having locker room issues and not having any more of the off-the-field theatrics? If that's the case, it would not shock me if both were brought back. But it's going to depend on, what type of season it is. And I question, how patient Woody is if this thing gets ugly, as ugly as some people think it might, really fast. And we saw what that could look like last year. I mean, we saw that Miami game where there was no one there and they were just getting slaughtered. You have to watch that for 16 weeks. I don't know if Woody wouldn't just go ahead and just completely clear house.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. And quickly, Woody, he accepted the role with, quote-unquote President Trump. Do you think that's actually going to have, any effect on his role within the team? Do you think that his brother will actually have a role on this team, or do you think that he is just a puppet, kind of like other people in the White House?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to get excited about this and be like, Woody's having a picture now. He's in London. This is great. I just, with how easy it is for Woody to Skype back in and watch all the games and track everything and fly back and forth because he's a multimillionaire, I just don't know how realistic that is. It's not like Woody is at all the practices anyway. He's here on game day, which he could still do if he wants to do. It's not that crazy to fly back and forth from London to New York. Maybe he's a little less involved and more deferential to different advisors. And, is that a good or a bad thing? Because the advisors that he's picked in the past haven't exactly panned out all that well for the Jets. So yeah, I would temper expectations on that making any type of major impact. Ultimately, the Jets, they're going to have to find a way to, either draft better or develop their players better that are currently drafted and put a competitive product on the field. And that's going to probably be built around fixing the quarterback position, fixing the tackle position, finding pass rushers, and finding shutdown corners, addressing all those premium positions where they've kind of been lacking in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go back down to, the sidelines, the coordinators. We talked about Todd Bowles. Let's talk about the guys who he's responsible for. Casey Rogers, scrutinized last year for the job that he did on the defense. Talent didn't live up to expectations. Players were not developed. Numerous penalties that just should not have happened. Just sloppy mistakes. Now we bring in John Morton, new offensive coordinator. Haven't seen really him in a play caller position, of importance for a long time. What are your thoughts on the coordinators? And we'll start with Casey Rogers since we are most experienced with him. Do you think that possibly last year the Jets let go of the wrong coordinator, or do you think they made the right decision?
I mean, I think through 2 years, Chan Gailey definitely did a better job than Casey Rogers did. I'm not sure what Casey Rogers has done outside of, be friends with Todd Bowles. I think this defense was underachieved and was full of miscommunications last year. And Rogers, again, I don't want to over-evaluate people on how they talk to the media, but just sounds sort of tone-deaf and a little ridiculous. Sometimes with some of the quotes that he's giving, say what you will about Gailey, and he was not good last year. He was excellent in 2015 and made a decision to get Quincy Enunwa at H-back, made the decision to get Eric Decker in the slot, and really got the most out of that offense with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So, I understand Gailey's getting up there in age, and he might not have been on the same page with what the Jets wanted to do at quarterback long-term, but Rodgers has, plenty to prove, and I think if the Jets' defense continues to struggle, I mean, obviously if Bowles goes, he goes too, but he would be, really a logical guy to have potentially on the chopping block. And with Morton, it's really hard to say. Morton has been an offensive coordinator for a very limited period of time at USC a long time ago when they weren't, particularly good. I think a lot of people, and this could end up being right, but a lot of people are sort of assuming he's going to run New Orleans offense, not really recognizing that New Orleans offense is Sean Payton and Drew Brees' offense. It's not John Morton's offense. They run, Sean Payton designs it. They design it in a way for Drew Brees. It's not necessarily translatable to what the Jets are going to do in New York. Early reports are on Morton that he's a fiery guy. He's going to be more diverse with his approach. They're going to integrate the tight ends and the fullbacks a little bit more. That could all be true, but I think he still remains a pretty big question mark. He just hasn't called plays at the NFL level ever. And, he was the Saints receivers coach for 2 years. I mean, he's coached a lot of other places. I don't know if he's just going to replicate exactly what Sean Payton did.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had, I guess at this point, former Jets wide receiver Quentin Patton on the show about a month ago, and he had some time with him from the San Francisco days where John Morton was also the wide receiver coach. He basically told us that, we should expect a run-first, ground-and-pound, West Coast offense, and what Quentin said, what maybe separated him from other players is that he was a receiver who can not only catch and do his job as a receiver, but be a blocker. And then we look at, the guys who we have on this team. I'm thinking Christian Hackenberg, individual who struggled in college, based off my opinions, in the pistol, in the shotgun. How is John Morton going to work with Christian Hackenberg here?
I think if and when Hackenberg is under center, the Jets have to find ways to protect him and make his life easy. So that means being a run-first offense, leaning on Bilal Powell, Matt Forte, and Elijah McGuire, setting up Hackenberg with easy, safe completions to get his confidence up, basic play action, one-read concepts, getting him some wide receiver screens to guys like Anua or Stewart or Hansen or Anderson, and letting them create after the catch. And I don't think you roll out Hackenberg in a 4-5 wide and have him making checks at the line behind a young and unproven offensive line. I think you lean on that running game, try to do things that will help him improve his completion percentage and get his confidence up. And then occasionally you're hopefully sucking the defenders closer to the line of scrimmage and letting Hackenberg use his arm strength and take some shots down the field, because obviously the Jets do have some vertical receivers with Robbie Anderson and potentially Chad Hansen. So it's going to be a challenge for one. I mean, Hackenberg is a guy who really, really struggled his last 2 years at Penn State, didn't play any meaningful football last year. So he has to find a way to make his offense as quarterback-friendly as possible if and when he's under center.
Absolutely. And you talked about the checks at the line. And from what I saw his freshman year, that the really great year that he had there, it was a good year, probably deserved to be the number one pick at that point in time, definitely the number one quarterback. He was able to make checks at the line. He was able to control an offense. It just seems that James Franklin came in and, for lack of better words, ruined Christian Hackenberg, at least for the time being, and what we see from him right now. Let me rephrase this. If Christian Hackenberg comes in and he starts getting comfortable behind this offensive line, and these guys are fairly decent, like we hope, like Brandon Shell, hopefully he can do you see Christian Hackenberg maybe getting the reins more than the running does, like the running backs do, Bilal Powell?
I think that's the hope. I mean, ultimately, you want your quarterback to be able to handle all those things, and if Hackenberg is going to be the guy, and clearly the Jets saw something in him for using the 50th pick on him, he's going to eventually have to take more of that on, and he's going to have a tight audition window here, because the Jets are going to receive a ton of pressure to take advantage of what is supposed to be a very good quarterback class next year. So Hackenberg needs to really change a lot of hearts and minds and say that the Jets should not consider taking a quarterback next year, and show that he could not just be a game manager, because you're not going to pass on a potentially great quarterback prospect for a game manager. He can be someone who can lead the offense and make people around him better. And that's a big leap to ask a guy to make who didn't play at all last year. But ultimately, that's the kind of progress he will have to make down the stretch if he doesn't want the Jets taking a quarterback in the first round next season.
No, yeah, for sure. And the Hackenberg subject, we'll stay with it for one more question here, just because, I think that's a lot of Jets fans are as far as what to be excited about, which I guess I'll ask you now. A lot of Jets fans, when they think about Christian Hackenberg, that's something to possibly be excited about. He's a question mark, and who knows? I mean, the Jets have been looking for a franchise quarterback for forever. So I guess I'll ask this question, then we'll go back to Hackenberg for one more. What is there to be excited about for this team in 2017? Is there one thing you are particularly excited about watching, or is there some other thing that is lesser known that you're looking forward to watching?
I mean, there's some intriguing young pieces, and I'm curious to see how they do with a bigger role, namely Quincy Anua and Robbie Anderson at receiver. Those are guys who have great size and athletic ability and have the chance to be playmakers, guys who could rip off big plays for touchdowns. You saw Anua do that against Baltimore and Cleveland last year, where he took little short passes and turned them into these monster touchdowns and type of plays that we haven't seen that frequently from the Jets. And even Anderson down the stretch making plays down the field. So do the Jets really have a bookend pair of talented receivers to build around? Never mind what Stewart or Hansen could bring. Campbell Powell flourish in a bigger role. Was Elijah McGuire a steal in the 6th round? Is Austin Seferian-Jenkins, is all the hype around him from spring football meaningful? Is he actually going to be a valuable target in the middle of the field? And then defensively, just curious to see if any of these guys could sort of rise to the occasion. Can Jordan Jenkins and Lorenzo Malden really be full-time outside linebackers? Is Justin Burris a starter, a corner, or is he only starting because the Jets are so thin at the position? And then last but not least, the 2 safeties that the Jets invested in this year with Jamal Adams and Marcus May. Somewhat controversial and surprising to go safety in the first 2 rounds. I think, although I do think Adams is kind of a no-brainer at the spot where they took him. Are those guys, particularly Adams, going to live up to the hype? I think you'll hear a lot of Defensive Rookie of the Year chatter for Adams leading to the season. Can he be a playmaker? Can he be a difference maker? Can he be sort of like what Landon Collins is to the Giants for the Jets? There'll be a lot of eyes on him. So there's a lot of young players. There's going to be a lot of competition, a lot of spots that are wide open, and that might make for a bit more of an interesting team than we saw, at least down the stretch last year, where you had a lot of aging veterans who basically had their spots sort of given to them and were just sort of going through the motions.
Yeah, for sure. And personally, I mean, I think watching the safety duo, the rookies, is going to be fun to watch. I think some fans should definitely temper their expectations because they're going to get burned, they're going to trip, they're going to miss a tackle, they're going to have some growing pains. But I'm hoping to see by the end of the year that they've shown enough promise to be a affordable, safety duo for the New York Jets. And as I mentioned, I did have one more question about Hackenberg. So I don't know necessarily what your take is on, who's going to start week 1 or whatnot, but I guess it's safe to assume that at some point this season, Christian Hackenberg is going to play. What is your stat prediction for him when he does play? And then you could mention how many games you see him playing, but depending on that, how many touchdowns, interceptions do you see him throwing?
I would say, if you asked me today, that I do think Josh McCown will still probably start week 1. I'm not saying I agree with that. I just think that's what's probably going to happen. Knowing McCown's age and injury history, I would not be surprised to see Hackenberg in there by week, 6, 7, something like that. Let's say he starts somewhere between 8 and 10 games. It's a little hard to project, numbers off that, but let's say if he starts 8 games, half a season, I could see him probably being somewhere around like 10 touchdowns and 10 interceptions with a 56, 57 completion percentage and maybe averaging around 200 or 210 yards per game. And
that means I win the bet, Ben.
I don't know if that's going to be enough to convince the Jets that he is their guy for next year. It probably shouldn't be. It also depends the context of those stats, when those touchdowns are coming, when those interceptions are coming, how he's playing on the road, how he's playing against better defenses. If it was me, I understand that you don't want to give the job to somebody who doesn't earn it. And there's a very real chance that right now Hackenberg is still the 3rd best quarterback on this roster, never mind the 1st, best quarterback on this roster. But, every game that Josh McCown is starting this year, it's sort of, wasted time. Josh McCown's not going to be on this team next year. Josh McCown isn't a good quarterback. I mean, he's 38. He's been in the league for 16 years. There's enough data, to back that up. But I could see a scenario where McCown starts and, is the guy for the first month and a half, and then whether it's injury or incompetence, the Jets, or pressure externally, the Jets will turn it over to Hackenberg, at some point in October.
Yeah, and last couple questions for this current team because it's pretty sickening, to be honest. But let's talk about some guys that could make it a little less sickening to watch. They didn't have great years last year, and we'll focus on defense for this one. I'm going to give you 4 candidates for a bounce-back year, and you tell me which one you think is most likely. Cool?
Okay, yeah.
All right, we'll start with Muhammad Wilkerson. Obviously, the injuries last year, maybe lack of trying. That is rumors out there. Don't know if I necessarily believe in that. Sheldon Richardson did not have a great year last year. Marcus Williams battled injuries all year. And then Lorenzo Malden battled injuries all year, put on some unnecessary weight, thanks Todd Bowles. So out of those 4, who do you think will have a bounce-back year, most likely to have a bounce-back year?
I'll go with Wilkerson. Wilkerson, when he's been himself and has been playing for a contract, he's been a borderline all-pro player, and the Jets do have an out in his contract after this year if he has another disappointing year. So he is incentivized to play to get the back half of his contract extension that he signed last year. So, he seems to be properly motivated. Hopefully he is healthy. It's debatable, I guess, ultimately who has more raw talent, him or Richardson. But the season that Wilkerson had in 2015 was as good of a season we've seen from the Jets defensive end in a while. So, I will go with him. I do think Marcus Williams is a guy a lot of Jet fans have kind of written off, even though, his struggles last year were involved with injuries, and he was really good for the team in 2015. I'm not, Justin Burris has plenty more to prove in my mind than a guy like Williams, who has played a decent amount and played well at times. And Malden, is going to be dealing with some legal issues now going through August, which, never helps. Richardson, I would still not be surprised if he was traded in training camp or before the trade deadline. If he is used in the proper way, he can be extremely talented, but he has really been disappointing overall the past 2 years after a great first 2 years to his career. But ultimately, I'll go with Wilkerson.
Fair enough.
And Joe, I think that was as you were saying that. I think we actually came up with another question. So let's ask about this. You just answered kind of one of them, but to give 4 kind of awards. So the Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Most Improved. We obviously would ask Comeback Player of the Year, but you just can't answer that.
Yeah.
Of those 4, can you
give
your? And we just did it. So your MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Most Improved. So, sorry, I messed it up. Rookie, Offense, Defense, and Most Improved. There you go. I finally got it.
Rookie
Awards are won in the offseason.
I will say that I'll take the safe bet and say that Jamal Adams will be the team's best overall rookie. I'm not sure that he's going to be a Defensive Rookie of the Year, but I think he will, after maybe some early growing pains, will come on strong in the back half of the year and make some of the plays that really caught the Jets' eyes and made him sort of the consensus, arguably the consensus top safety prospect in the draft. I think offensive MVP will be Quincy Enunwa. I think he'll be their leading receiver, lead the team in touchdowns. I think he also blocks very well for the team on the edge and will continue to do that. I don't see any reason that he won't keep getting better as he gets more confident and gets more targets funneled to him. You could also make a case for Bilal Powell. They're actually going to use him as a lead back, but I'll go with Enunwa. Defensively, I do think Wilkerson will have a nice bounce back here, but I'll still go with Leonard Williams. If Leonard Williams continues on the trajectory that he took from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, he'll be the best overall player on that defense and should be a guy who's, around 9-10 sacks. So, I'll be looking at, Leonard Williams, Quincy Enunwa, and Jamal Adams to, grab that. And I guess, if the team MVP overall does not, come from that group, other guys to potentially look at, it would not be flashy, but a guy like James Carpenter, if he has another solid 16 games of starting, Bilal Powell, if he is used the right way, could be over 1,000 yards rushing and over 500-600 yards receiving. It's tough. It's tough defensively because that linebacker group has so many question marks around it still. So I really would still just focus on Leonard Williams on that side of the ball.
And who would you say is the most improved player?
I think I'm trying to look at some of these mid-round draft picks and who's going to be someone who really takes that jump. It's hard to say that Brandon Shell will be the most improved player because he was good in his 3 games, but I think him starting 16 games and being a competent right tackle would be a huge win for McCagnon, and I think that's something that's on the table. And I think even though he was pretty good in his initial starts, if he starts 16 games and is good, I think you could put him into that category.
Definitely. Those would have been my picks, so those are we're on the same page. Ben, any last questions about this current roster before we move on to some, past good memories, ones that we can cherish?
Yeah, well, I guess before we'll ask one more, and I guess I'm trying to think. I want to be a closer for this year. I know, I'm trying to think. All right, I guess, you already said. Here you go. You said that Josh McCown will probably be the starter week 1. Who do you think is going to win that quarterback number 2 battle between Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg? This is probably the biggest competition people are looking at is between the 2 young quarterbacks, because a lot of people, including myself, believe that the New York Jets should start one of these young quarterbacks. So which one do you think will win in their battle for the number 2 spot, or arguably the number 1 spot?
I think it's going to be tight, but I think the Jets will give Hackenberg every opportunity to win that. And if it's anywhere remotely close, they will give it to Hackenberg. They drafted Petty with the thought in mind that he'd be a long-term backup here, and they drafted Hackenberg with the thought in mind that they could develop into being their starting quarterback. And, again, if it's close, I think they're aware of the optics of starting the season with Christian Hackenberg as a third-string and active quarterback, and that might not be fair to Petty. But Petty's going to really have to go above and beyond if he wants to be the starter or be the second-string quarterback, because they paid McCown $6 million, so they clearly envision some type of role where he's playing at some point here. And with Hackenberg, they need to see what he has this season. And they've kind of, not that Petty's had a huge sample size, but they did see Petty play last year, so they need to get Hackenberg in a situation where they could get some tape on him as an NFL player to inform what they're going to do next year.
Fair enough. And do you think that it will be close? You said if it's anywhere near close between Hack and Petty. Do you think it will be close, or do you think one guy has a clear advantage, in your opinion?
I think it will be close. I think in a controlled setting of practice, and even in what you see with preseason with some of the vanilla schemes, I think those two guys will be about the same. They'll make their share of mistakes. They'll make some encouraging throws. They have, a lot of arm talent between those two guys. But ultimately, I think it will be close enough where the Jets will give it to Hackenberg.
Do you think that's a bad sign for Hackenberg?
I mean, I would sadly not surprise me if that, an impartial observer who knew nothing of those three players went to camp this year and watched the three of them for 3 weeks. I could very easily see a scenario where they say McCown and Petty are the two best guys here. But I think with the context added of how these guys were drafted and what their situation is, I wouldn't be surprised if something got shuffled around. Again, it's just hard because Hackenberg has not played good football in such a long period of time. And Petty was bad last year, but at least he had a couple moments where he looked to be okay. Hackenberg didn't really play at all. When he did play in the preseason, outside of the one drive against the Giants, he was pretty damn bad. And then it was, bad the last 2 years at Penn State. So it's hard. You just got to see it from the guy. You got to see him go out there and practice well and then play well in a game situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And we have a few more questions here. We'll ask. We'll go to our little mailbag here. We'll ask some stuff about past teams, and we'll get you out of here. Let us know though if you have to go. This interview's been pretty long, but you've been so good that we've been just asking all the questions we have, just because I think we think you offer tremendous insight. So I guess we'll hop into we'll go into the mailbag. If there was one move that you could reverse from the last 10 years, what would it be and why? This is by @Greg Armstrong _. So if there's one move in the last 10 years that you could reverse, what would it be and why?
Last 10 years. So that puts us back to 2007. God, that is
That's a long
big
time
window.
ago.
There is a big window question. In the near term, it would have been not paying Hackenberg. Paying Fitzpatrick. And it's easy to be. It's also easy to have revisionist history and be like, just take Dak Prescott instead of Christian Hackenberg in the middle rounds. Now, I did like Prescott a lot before the draft. I had no idea who was going to be as good as he was, but those sort of pop more in the near term. Now, going back to 2007, you can make the case that the Jets shouldn't have made that play for Brett Favre and should have just stuck with Pennington, considering how everything shook out. You could say they should have found a way to then, if it doesn't work that way, you could have said they should have made the case to find a way to convince Favre to stay in 2009 because they had Favre as the quarterback in 2009 instead of Sanchez. Who knows how that season could have ended. It's how the quarterback position is shaken out, and the guys they've invested draft picks in a quarterback, from Christian Hackenberg to Bryce Petty to Geno Smith to Greg McElroy to Eric Ainge to Mark Sanchez, none of which has really worked out. I also would have liked to see, over that entire period, a more diversified approach to the draft. This team has taken a defensive player 9 straight years in the first round. This team has overly concentrated resources at defensive end position, not pass rusher, not cornerback, not left tackle, not quarterback. So I think that those decisions have piled up, and where the Jets really went wrong, and it was understandable at the time, is how many assets they traded, how many draft picks they traded away. They drafted 3 players in 2009. They drafted 4 players in 2010, and they were not a good 7 players overall. And I think that those 2 drafts, the 2011 draft outside of Wilkerson, and then the 2012 draft, never mind what happened with Idzik, has just set this team back so far. Drafts where they take Quentin Coples, they take Stephen Hill. They're using picks on guys like John Connor and Taj Boyd. All those years of drafting has just gutted, the middle and back end of this roster.
No, yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, you look at that IDIC 12 right there, and it's definitely rough. I mean, for those who
really
mentioned, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, you look at, IDIC had a few gyms like Brian Winters and Quincy Nunez. It's like, yeah, but I mean, he had like 25 draft picks or something crazy, and he hit on like 3 of them, and the rest were just god awful. Weren't even role players. So I mean, definitely, I think a lot of that IDIC drafting I would regret. But when I think somebody posted this on Twitter or something, it was a different worded question, but it was on the same lines of if you could take back one thing that McCagnon's done, I think what it was, and it was just everybody was just wish you didn't re-sign Ryan Fitzpatrick, wish you rolled in with Geno, and who knows how this year would have gone. I still don't think they would have been good, but
yeah,
we'll see.
I don't think it would have changed anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and Joe, on a more positive note, what is your favorite Jets memory of all time? You said you're 30 now, so I guess in the last 30 years that you've witnessed this team hasn't always been positive, but what would be your favorite memory?
If you jump out watching them win a home playoff game against Jacksonville in '98, that was, a team that certainly had the ability to win the Super Bowl that year, and just, they were just so good that season, and to have a home playoff game that they really just dominated Jacksonville from start to finish was fun. Same thing in 2002, I believe it was, when they had the run with Pennington and beat the Colts 41-0 in the first round of the playoffs. That was another team that sort of felt unbeatable for a while until they sort of ran into that buzzsaw in Oakland. And then more recently, what I consider the closest feeling to winning a Super Bowl when they beat New England in the playoffs, a game that, even the most optimistic Jet fan at the time, really, it was hard to see them having a chance in that game after how New England had handled them early in the season and some of the struggles the Jets had in the back end. That game, felt as close as a Super Bowl has felt like probably in recent Jets memory, and that's probably part of the reason that they laid an egg the next week against Pittsburgh, which was the most painful loss I've seen. But, that day, that moment, going into New England and winning a game that I think they were, 10, 11-point underdogs in was, about as good as it gets for this 30-year-old Jets fan.
Did we just lose Joe?
Nope, no, he's still there.
I'm here.
Okay. It cut out a little bit. Sorry.
All right, but okay.
Oh, it's not my bad. We'll go to the mailbag. We'll go back to it now. Let's talk about these rookies. This comes from Alex Rufio, caller of ours, at Rufio_187. Which of these offensive rookies will have the biggest impact? Are Darius Stewart, Chad Hansen, Elijah McGuire, or Jordan Leggett?
If Stewart wasn't dealing with these 2 surgeries, I do think the Jets were going to put him in a position to get a lot of touches early. I think he has a pretty unique skill set compared to the rest of their group of receivers. Yep. Even though I like the Hansen pick better than the Stewart pick, Hansen is going to have to work his way into reps over Robbie Anderson, and some of the outside routes could still be run by Newell, whereas what Stewart does, sort of this slot receiver who can line up in the backfield and motion out and catch screen passes, it's sort of a unique skill set. So I think he'll be more, if he's healthy, he'll be more involved early in the season. Leggett, if he has a good camp, is going to be the starting tight end week 1 because Austin Severian-Jenkins suspended the first 2 games. McGuire, I like the McGuire pick a lot, and I like the value. I just think early in the year it's going to be a lot more Forte and Powell. My hope is that down the stretch we see more of him. If I had to guess right now, Stewart will probably be the most involved from start to finish, but I did like the value of the Hansen and McGuire picks better than the Stewart pick overall.
All right, and continue on with the mailbag. I think you kind of answered this one, but it's phrased a little differently. You could have a different take. This is from New York Jets Supporters Club, another listener of ours. He asks, is Bryce Petty the best quarterback on the roster right now for Week 1?
It's a fair question, and I am not a Bryce Petty fan at all. I didn't like the pick. I didn't like him as a prospect. I don't think he was good at all last year, but Josh McCown isn't good either. I mean, Josh McCown had a good 6-game run in Chicago a few years ago. He is 38. He was not good when he played last year. Anyone who watched the Jets and Browns game last year should know that. And Christian Hackenberg hasn't taken an NFL snap yet. So you could make a reasonable argument that as of today, Petty might be the best guy. It's just, is it more valuable in finding out what Hackenberg can do than trying to go ahead with Petty, whose ceiling might just be a backup quarterback? But it's not a crazy question.
All right, and the final one from the mailbag. This one's a little lengthy, but I know mid-season trades in the NFL are rare, but is there any chance the Jets steal Richardson during the season? The Pats got a third-rounder for Jamie Collins. If Richardson plays well early, could we get a similar return for him, or is his off-the-field baggage too much? And that comes from @FromAllFields.
I mean, if he plays well, as capable as if he plays up to his talent level early in the season, I don't think it's crazy to think the Jets would get a third-round pick from him. I mean, everyone says that, they should just let him walk. They'll get a compensatory pick in 2019. Every game that you're playing with Richardson, Wilkerson, and Williams, if he's not going to be here long-term, in a way, is kind of a waste of time because you're scheming all these guys around, but you're not playing with all three of them long-term. I think the Jets should be happy to get a second or third-round pick for Wilkerson, stockpile as many draft picks as they can, build around Williams and Wilkerson as your two defensive ends, and start finding a way to get some edge rushers and to get some shutdown corners in here. And I think, if we see an injury in camp, Richardson could get moved at that point. Or, again, if he starts the season very well and a contender thinks he could help them get over the hump, that's definitely going to be something the Jets entertain because I just can't see a scenario where the Jets are giving him a long-term contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really good chance that Sheldon Richardson just completely balls out this year. In fact, I consider it more likely than Muhammad Wilkerson have a bounce-back year. If there's one thing I've learned about Sheldon Richardson, besides he likes fast cars, is he likes money a little more than fast cars. And more money means more fast cars. So he's going to ball out this year. No matter where he ends up, somebody's going to have to sign him to an extension. They're going to have to franchise tag him. He's going to get some new money. So I think he's going to ball out to earn that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not out of the question. Obviously, the Jets have to help him with how they use him, but the talent's there. I mean, we saw it as a rookie, and we saw it in his second year.
Yeah. All right, and this is my last question, and it's kind of a fanboy question. Let's talk about Barstool, because I believe one or two now from you blogs on there. You did the mailbag.
Yeah, I've written a decent amount for them over the past year. I think I've maybe done like, I don't know, I want to say 10 to 15 different articles maybe over the past year or so. That's been just a fun way to kind of reach out and expand the audience a little more. Our podcast is still technically produced through KFC Radio, although it's not KFC Radio. It's not set up in the same way that it was at the time. But through that, work with KFC to get access to the site, and every now and then we'll chime in with some Jets commentary. I usually like to do mailbags, but I've done a few other things after Mangold retired, and a couple other draft previews, and the comment section is particularly vicious there for a Jets fan at this moment. But it's a good way to get more exposure to a different audience, and they don't really have a ton of people writing a lot about the Jets right now. Understandable considering with the state of the team. So I like chiming in there from every now and then.
Explain to me the KFC thing, and also if you're not going to take the Jets writing job for them, I have my resume. Can I just send it to you and then you forward it to them? That would be really awesome. I think that would be a fair trade. But explain the KFC thing to me because I'm a big KFC Radio guy. Him and Fights do a great job. Always listen to their show twice a week.
Yeah, I was doing the podcast independently on Blog Talk Radio a while ago, and I tweeted out, does anyone have any other suggestions for hosting or how to record? And he just shot me a direct message and said, look, I'm a fan of your work. If you want, we can roll up under KFC Radio and we'll help you out with with some of the distribution and production. And that was basically it. I've met him a handful of times. We have a couple mutual friends, and it's been a good situation. It's not I'm free to write when I want, which is like once a month maybe, depending on what happens, once or twice a month, and then they help with the podcast distribution or the production of it, which has been valuable because it's not something that I'm able to put as much time into as I'd like to.
Yeah, well, if he's also looking for another Jets podcast, we're right here. Like I said, you could just forward us. We're happy to
just
sit on
plug it all in, Kyle.
Yeah, hey, I got a goal, Ben. You can't tell me I'm not trying. And that's it for my questions. Ben, you can go far. I know you got some good questions lined up to end this interview.
Yeah, we have one more, and this is a little bit of a. I'll give credit to Kyle for this question. It's a little bit of a. It's not a question you might hear often, but I think it's an interesting one just because you have 150 million impressions, I believe, for Whistle Sports. So you're obviously I'll say experienced in marketing and stuff. If you were the Jets PR team, how would you promote this team? What would you sell? And Kyle notes that I think they could take some tips and pointers from you. So how would you promote this team? What would be your main selling point, and how would you deal with that as with your marketing experience?
I would take some cues from some of the things that the Sixers have done in recent years. I think the Jets are sort of embracing this process a little bit, and I think you just have to market some of your young and talented players, and that's Jamal Adams, that's Leonard Williams, that's Quincy Enunwa. I don't think you have to go ahead with the facade of making like Matt Forte the face of the franchise or any of the marketing that you're doing, or same with Josh McCown. I mean, embrace these young faces, put them front and center, be more open-minded with some of your game day experience and fan access policies, knowing that this is going to be, uphill. It's going to be an uphill battle getting people into the stadium this year. So this is the type of year to try more outside-of-the-box things. I think you're already seeing that with their boarding pass ticket initiative, but different ways to get fans involved, get them on the field before games, get them access to different events. Those type of things are going to help, and, be aligned and market that this is a process and this is a rebuild and it's going to require patience, but there are some young faces here who we're going to focus on, and have sort of have a sense of not a sense of humor, but be aware and don't be tone deaf of the current situation in the team, and have a little fun with it, and understand and play up that this is one of the youngest teams in football, and will be a young and hungry competitive team.
For sure, I like it. I think that's a good idea, and especially
the process.
Yeah, especially the trouble they've had, filling seats and the whole issue with the season ticket holders and the PSLs and stuff. I think marketing the young players and would definitely be a smart pick for them. Joe, you've been absolutely awesome. Your takes are definitely some of the most knowledgeable you can find in this Jets community. Why don't you go ahead and shout out your media for your Twitter, which is, I believe, it's at J Caporoso. But just shout out everything. Plug, Kyle was trying to plug our show earlier, but plug anything you want for our listeners that you think they should go check out.
Sure. Just check out the website, turnonthejets.com. You could follow me on Twitter at J Caporoso. It's JCAPOROSO. Check out our podcast, Turn on the Jets podcast. You can just search it on iTunes and find it. We have a few other podcasts under our network too. Slight Work, Play Like a Jet, and Draft Season. Play Like a Jet is on team history. Draft Season is year-round draft coverage. Make sure to give a follow to some of our other writers: Dalvin Osario, David Aiken, Daniel Essen, Jeff Lloyd. If you just follow me, I'm regularly tweeting out their handles and giving them shouts out. And then also check out our store at The Loyalist, which is loyalist.com/turnonthejets. And I think that covers everything.
Joe, that you were, as I said, you were awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think Kyle and I might invest in that tank top you guys have in your store. I think that's a gem right there.
I'm a big guy for that.
So. Joe, thank you so much, man. I hope to hear from you sometime on Twitter or in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. And that was Joe Caporoso from Turn on the Jets. Awesome guy right there. Delivered some great takes.
You know what he should do with those tank shirts? I know. I've been in professional mode for like the past 45 minutes. I'm going to interrupt you. Come on, we expect this. He should have, the tank shirts, he should have made them like the tank tops. It should have been tank. And there should have been like writing on the side that said guns for like, your arms, and then tank in the middle. That would have been artillery joke. Since we're going World War III.
Boo.
Get prepared.
Boo. That's why Joe makes the money, Kyle. All right, well, that will do it for our little interview. I shouldn't say little. That was an hour interview right there with Joe Caporoso, just under an hour interview right there with Joe Caporoso. Definitely one of the more lengthy interviews, but one of the ones I've had the most fun with. Definitely worth it. I mean, he, as I said, and I kept repeating myself, but I mean, he's just one of the most knowledgeable guys you can find out there. We could give an open-ended topic and he can run with it. So definitely an awesome guy right there. And as he mentioned, I guess I'll shout it out again. He is at J Caporoso, which is JCAPOROSO. That's where you can find him if you're not following him already. And he's a great guy on Twitter too. He tweets out a lot of GIFs and some insights and whatever. So if you have a Twitter, definitely make sure to go follow him. All right, Kyle, that will end it for us today, but in a few days, on Wednesday, we are back Wednesday in 2 days to actually have a show where we'll talk, Kyle and I will talk, and we have an interview Kyle, you want to plug out the interview?
Yeah, we'll have Jets 7th-round pick, rookie cornerback Derek Jones on the show. He was gracious enough to agree to an interview. We'll be talking rookie camp, OTAs, Todd Bowles, what he's like in the locker room from a current player, and hopefully the Jet Take curse does not carry on.
Quentin Patton logo.
Yeah, can we just? Because I've mentioned it multiple times on social media, so it's out there already. Let's just discuss this. Fair warning, and I hope nothing happens to Joe. Current players who have been on, the Jet Take, Lozo, Lorenzo Molden, and Quentin Patton. I'm not forgetting anybody, right? Everybody else is retired, right?
Yeah, everybody else is no longer on the team or retired.
All right, okay, so their careers couldn't have been ending because they're already over. But Quentin Patton gets injured, like a month later, gets cut from the team, signs a settlement. Don't know where he's going to be at next year. Hopefully he gets another, chance at some point. And then Lorenzo Molden certainly doesn't sound innocent at this point. That's all I'm going to say.
They're innocent until they're proven guilty, but we'll keep quiet on it. Lorenzo is definitely a friend of the community. So we'll keep quiet. Hold on, Kyle. We'll keep quiet on it. We don't necessarily know all the facts yet, and we'll make sure. But we're definitely hoping for the best and here to support him and hoping that
we should post pictures of us in the shirt. You have the shirt, right?
Okay. Anyways, but we're hoping for the best for both those guys. And yeah, it's two, so maybe it's a coincidence. But yes, Derek Jones will be on the show on Wednesday, and we'll do a whole 2-hour show with callers and stuff. And you can call in on that show. Our number is 1-515-739-1285. Enter the PIN 261860 with the pound or the hash sign at the end, and that'll take you right to our show. Thank you so much for listening.
Some new segments, by the way. New segments on Wednesday.
Yes, it's a huge 6-week lull between now until training camp, so we've had to plug some new segments, and so we're giving you 2 interviews because we did not do the show last week, and then we didn't upload the one from 2 weeks ago. So I felt, I think I came around on doing 2 interviews in 1 week. We're rewarding our fans because we haven't been on.
You guys have been great.
Okay. You
guys deserve a little more. And is that radio silence from Ben Blessington right there? I don't. You there?
Oh, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
Cut out for a second. All right. Anyways, I don't know what just happened there.
Follow us at the Jet Take.
Yes.
Twitter.
Here we are. Hey. This is my. I got the plugs.
Crossing a line.
Crossing the line, yes. Yes, you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're all over the place. YouTube. I released my highlight video I think 2 weeks ago. It is now over 1.2 thousand views, which is awesome. And we're hoping it'll continue to grow as we get closer to the season. Go check out Kyle's video. It is
not as popular, not as good.
Not as popular, but it is still a nice.
Oh my God! I just went to YouTube to check the view count, and we're still subscribed to a certain YouTuber who is trying to copy us. He posted a pump up, so.
I see. Anyway, so please make sure to check that out. And then, as always, you can find our podcast all over the place. We've tried to get in as many different podcatchers as possible. iTunes, Google,
KFC,
iHeartRadio.
KFC, I will do that.
But we're basically all over the place. So please make sure to go check us out on our social media and our different podcast sites. And before I forget, we have a blog page. Don't forget about the blog page, www.thejettake.libsyn.com. That has a few articles we've written and just some, or I guess Kyle's written. I've yet to write on the blog page yet. I will break the blog page virginity by the end of the year.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Ben.
All right. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. And we will make sure we'll be back in 2 days with Derek Jones on Wednesday, and hopefully you guys can call in. We'll get this episode out right now, and thank you so much for listening. That'll do it for this interview for the
Producer
Jet
wanted. Producer wanted.
Producer still wanted.
Producer wanted. We have someone lined up. They would easily accept, like they said they would accept it.
All right.
We're looking for other people.
We'll keep it in-house. Producer wanted still, so if you're interested in producing the show, email us at thejettake or contact us on Twitter. Actually, our email is thejettake@gmail.com, and then or you could tweet us at thejettake. We have a few prospects, but right now it's just Kyle and I. Anyways, we'll leave you with the best chant in the NFL. We will be back in 2 days. Go Jets. Producer wanted.